I sat, as usual, in front of my computer in the early hours of the morning. My parents were asleep by now, and I had no need to worry about being caught. I sighed deeply and took a sip of the Mountain Dew I had bought earlier on in the day. I swished through games of League of Legends like a god, receiving much praise from my underlings who had teamed up with me. It was then that I realized I wasn't so cool for playing on beginner. I pushed myself away from the desk and stared profoundly. Having closed the game, I was accompanied by a lovely photograph of Jennifer Lawrence, which was sprawled over my background. I stretched backward, releasing a tired moan before slouching forward and rubbing my eyes. My eyes wandered to the clock on my taskbar, 3 AM. Another sigh escaped my mouth. I wasn't sure whether I could actually keep on staying up this late. It was Tuesday. I had played sick twice in a row by now. I rolled my eyes at the thought of going to school and stood up from my chair, moving to carefully exit the room. I slowly opened the door, sliding out as gracefully as I could. I left the door open and stood for a few moments to hear my father snoring. I could hear the tractor from the abyss ringing down the hallway. This gave me the okay to move on to get food. At this moment, even if my mum was awake, she'd be unable to hear due to a brutal death metal vocal being performed next to her. I slithered into the kitchen and put myself to work, scraping together whatever leftovers I had from the night's meal. Setting the food in the oven, I realized how creepy my surroundings actually were. The room was completely dark except for a fine ray of moonlight breaking in through the window. The object I was using was, luckily, perfectly illuminated by the convenient moonlight. But that didn't subtract from the fact that the courtyard directly in front of the kitchen was only half lit, folds of a large wall surrounding the area. Every glimpse I got of the yard through the curtain-shrouded window was relooked, as I could have sworn I saw something in the shadows. Being one that adores the thrill of a good scare, I decided I'd investigate. So I unlocked the back door and slipped out into the courtyard. The courtyard was filled with random odds and ends, couches, ladders, even an old toilet which had somehow found its way out here. The shadows cast from these random objects morphed together to present an array of different shapes in the dim light. It wasn't until I started catching glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye that I grew wary that it was very late, and I lived in a very shitty part of town. It happened on more than one occasion that a teenage girl went missing out of the blue, or a child would get lost in the park only to turn up near the river a few days later, half beaten and burnt. The area was notorious for serial murders and underground gang activity. My parents had planned to move near the end of the month, but a tight economic situation got the better of us. The thought of being kept against my will in a van, my location unknown and my person untraceable, probably amongst other drugged, moaning people, got hold of my mind pretty quickly. I scanned the area one more time before running inside to get my food, which had finished heating up in the microwave, and I ran off to my bedroom, silent as a mouse. I put the food on my bed and sat beside it. It almost seemed as if the eerie feeling from the rest of the house had leaked in through the door whilst I was out. Even though my room was small, it never failed to unsettle me on a frightening night. The curtains would often move slightly, as my windows weren't completely airtight. The same problem made my room pretty cold most nights. My mum also took it upon herself to put up a few drawings I did from when I was easily 4 to 6 years old, up all around my room. This wasn't a very welcoming sight in the middle of the night, when bumps are often present just outside my room. I sat staring at the pictures put up. One was of a scarecrow. His body was made out of pasted bits of material and buttons. His eyes lacked the joyful emotion most children put into their pictures. His were buttons, always staring, always the same emotionless stare. Beside the picture was a mirror, which coincidentally provided a perfect view of my door. I avoided this item specifically. I don't feel I need to explain why. On the opposite side of the room, according to the window, was the last picture. This one was framed. It was a crude drawing of two people. They looked sad and contained, as if they had something to hide that they knew would hurt everyone around them. I can't remember why I drew this, nor why my mother thought it appropriate to put it up in my room. I stared at it for a good few minutes before noticing something very out of place. Toward the bottom of the frame, two red lights were reflected from the curtain behind me. Shocked, I turned quickly. Through the curtain I could see the faint reminder of the red that made it through from a car's rear lights. I watched for a few seconds as they stood completely still, right in front of my house. Thoughts raced through my head. The thought of a very few large men breaking into my house and doing me and my family harm set an undeniable sense of horror throughout my body. The decision to check what was up came spontaneously. I had no idea what I'd do if I saw four men dressed in black trying to enter my house, but I looked anyway. What I saw sent my stomach straight to my feet. The light had not been from a car, but from the eyes of a thing. I don't know what it was, but I could tell simply from the look it gave me that it wasn't friendly. A creature the size of a large dog stood in front of my window. It was covered in a black fur that almost glistened in the moonlight. Its face was that of a human's, only the skin appeared to be pulled back over the skull, and instead of leading to a normal body, it led to what looked like a child's interpretation of a lion's body brought to life. Its facial features were extended far beyond that of a human. Its eyes were large, round, and shone red. What would normally be the whites of the eyes were replaced by a reddish-white smudge around the bright red bit surrounding the iris. His mouth stretched from ear to ear, lined with jagged, shark-like teeth. The sight caught me by surprise. I stood frozen for a few seconds. I wanted to turn back and run, but my legs felt stiff on the ground. Shortly after regaining control from my adrenaline, I whipped the curtain shut and ducked down next to my bed, quickly jumping up and sitting on it. I sat, pondering what to do. The feeling of horror from before was now replaced with a dread, a deep fear within that couldn't make sense of what was going on. Why was it standing there? Was it staring at me? I held back tears as I thought of what I could possibly do. Finally, I decided I'd wake my parents and tell them. I got up and wiped the tears from my face, walking over to the door. I took a deep breath and reached out for it, before I realized I forgot to lock the back door.